Hey, good morning, everybody. We're glad you could join us today. You've got the Cine Lens team here from Zeiss. On the top left panel is Snehal Patel. He's the Senior Sales Director. Most of you know his smiling face. I'm Tony. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Zeiss on the photo and Cine side. So I'm here to help support you guys and make sure you've got all of the content pieces or promotional items that you need to make sure everything's going well. And then to my right is Stephen Balsley. He's the sales technical specialist who is also helping Snehal. And then lastly, in the bottom left corner, you'll see Katia Del Rosario. She is the marketing specialist who is focused on the Cine business. And the three of them are in the LA showroom over in Sherman Oaks, and I'm stationed here in New York. So welcome. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Snehal Patel. He's got an excellent presentation for you, talk about the Supreme Prime lenses and some of the details behind them.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? Good? We're going to jump right into it and go into our presentation. First of all, is my audio okay? Everyone, Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounding good? All right, great. Excellent. So I'm going to start sharing this document and we will go from there. Give me 1 second. Right here. Share and play this presentation. All right, everyone see these on your screens? Great. So first of all, when was Zeiss founded? Well, Zeiss was founded in 1846, so it's an old company. It's been around for quite some time. We have historically been involved in optics since you know, the advent of the garage workshop that Carl Zeiss had for microscopes, and that was actually the first product that Carl Zeiss worked on and outputted in mass quantities was microscopes, and that's a lot of that's due to the work that Ernest Abbe did after he came in and joined Carl Zeiss. And this was a little while after the company was started. Ernest Abbe really transformed a lot of the methodologies of how manufacturing was done around these, you know, really mysterious objects, because up until, you know, this era, a lot of the optical ways of, you know, creating new focal lengths or new magnifications basically happened by trial and error. So, you know, you had a lot of people trying all kinds of different things to see if, you know, they could make a magnification higher by moving some glass around, moving it back and forth. And you weren't really following a path like physics, studying exactly how this happened on paper before you tried something. So, you know, a lot of telescopes were created this way, you know, microscopes or magnifying glasses, you know what works. So you try to modify a little bit to do something else. But using math itself became very important in this era. And that's when Zeiss excelled, because they were able to use math to, you know, really dive deep into creating stuff. So if you look at the history of how involved Zeiss has been with cinema, it's been there since the beginning, because you can see this camera from Patel Camera, which is a French manufacturer, which was later bought by a German company. But this camera itself was manufactured in 1915 and actually exists in the showroom. It's on loan from the ASC, but it's in the showroom that that Tony mentioned earlier in Sherman Oaks, and it has a Zeiss Tessar lens inside of it, as you can see in the picture on the top right. And this was manufactured in Jena, which was the original headquarters in the southeast part of Germany, where we still have a factory, but it's not the headquarters anymore. But this is, you know, what was our early mark into filmmaking. And at that time, you know, you were dealing with all these different formats and not a lot of stable. The industry wasn't very stable at that time, but you saw that Zeiss was involved. And then when there was a chance to jump into the stable film industry, you know, Zeiss took its chance with Arri and started a relationship that actually began in around 1934, 1935. And when they came out with their first Airflex 35 camera in 1937, it had Zeiss lenses that you could buy with it, and that came with a package. And this was a tradition that was carried on, this OEM tradition, up until now. So we still manufacture and sell lenses to Arri that Arri sells to the public, which is the Ultra Prime, Master Primes, and Master Anamorphics. And these are for Super 35 or smaller sensors. They're fantastic lenses of the utmost quality, really popular in filmmaking and television, used on all kinds of different TV shows and movies all the time for many years, for decades. Of course, in the U.S., we saw in the late 40s is when Zeiss lenses with array cameras came into the market after the war, and really started to see the lenses used a lot in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and of course more recently. So just to quickly go over the history of the kind of lenses that we've put out, you can see that there's the ultra primes and then the digi primes, which are really interesting. That was actually distributed through Banpro exclusively in the Americas, in the United States. And that was for 2/3 inch sensors, digital sensors, CCD technology. Really cool lenses, quite sharp and clean, very interesting. Then there was a digi zoom actually that came out later as well. And that was a very interesting lens as well. There was master primes, of course, master zoom, which a lot of rental houses still have. The original compact primes, which were PL mount only, and then the CP2s, which had interchangeable mount system, which was really revolutionary at the time and really left a mark in cinema, because there's some 30,000 plus pieces available in the world. So there's a lot of cinema glass out there, CP2 glass out there. And then the CZ2s, which are the compact zooms, what we call the cinema zooms, great quality, great coverage, full frame coverage, lightweight, compact, master anamorphics, lightweight zoom 3, which came out more recently. And this is a 21-100 that's super 35 capable, so it's not full frame like the CP2s were, or the compact zooms. But then we had the CP3s that we introduced. And of course, after that, there was the Supreme Primes and the Supreme Prime Radiance lenses. So there's a lot of lenses out there, and this is what we're talking about today, is how do you put the two together? Because there's so many choices out there, and really a lot of this presentation is agnostic to manufacturers. It's not about Zeiss and only what we do, but in general, there's a lot of lens systems that are made for full frame cameras or full frame plus or 65mm cameras, or they're made for super 35 or smaller, as we saw with the digi primes, 2/3 inch or micro 4/3. So how do you navigate this world and put the two together? Because it's really, really confusing out there. And as you can see from this page, there's so many choices out there for sensor technologies. And this, chart represents all the popular cameras that people use right now for filmmaking. And the sizes are they're various, because there's no real standard out there. There used to be kind of a standard, at least. Within that standard, there was some room to play. But here we have a lot of different variations. So for example, if you look at the second row and the third row of sensors, up until the micro 4/3 sensor size, you're talking about cameras that are dubbed super 35. So everyone's calling this sensor super 35, but really it's not. It could be quite big in comparison in terms of the diameter needed of lens coverage. Because if you look at the 6K Dragon full frame or the 8K Helium full frame, using the full sensor size, that diagonal is huge in comparison. If you think about 34 millimeters compared to 31 millimeters, which is the super 35 format, 25 by 19. So that's really interesting, that you would have to have a lens that really provides you the coverage of those actually 3 more critical millimeters of coverage, and not be super dark in the corners and things like that, to be able to use with that camera system. So you have to be cognizant of that. If you look at the Sony Venice or Alexa LF, these are much larger sensors. These are the kind of sensors cinematographers want to use. And we're going to talk about what are the reasons why cinematographers want to use them. But we know that this is getting more and more popular. This is the kind of camera systems that manufacturers are selling right now. So what do we do? Well, it's a 3-step process. First of all, you identify what kind of sensor you're dealing with, and what is the diagonal of the sensor. And then you say, all right, well, which of these choices of lenses that I have will work with this sensor type. Okay, and once you do that, and then the third thing you have to do is just test all the time. You have to, no matter what happens, you have to make sure that you test, because if you don't test, you're going to have the issue of sorry, 1 second. There we go. If you don't test, you're going to have the issue of not knowing for sure if this coverage works or not for your particular system, because you hear all kinds of rumors out there like, well, you know, this lens line, like the Master Primes, covers full frame if you use this focal length, that focal length, but it won't work for this one. You know, these are other people's experiences, but you really got to test for yourself to see if this is going to work. For example, if you took a camera lens that was meant for a larger, or sorry, a smaller sensor size, and try to use it with a larger sensor, you might get some vignetting or darkening of the corners that might be acceptable for one type of project, but not for another. So you really got to understand what you're getting into. So it's always a 3-step process. 1, identify what sensor size you have. 2, figure out, will my lens cover that sensor size? Or, you know, do I need something else? And 3, test to make sure in all the focal lengths, I'm getting what I'm looking for. And I understand what my limitations are. Maybe I might have to crop into the sensor a little bit, but at least I know after testing, you know, if you like the qualities of that lens. So where these formats come from? Well, the formats actually came from film itself, from 35 millimeter. So it came from still film and motion picture film. This is where the format was derived from. So motion picture film, of course, we ran the film up and down, you know, for a lot of reasons, for gravity, for, you know, not having a gyroscopic effect, things like that. And it helped, you know, to get the film through the gate at that speed. And that's why motion picture film has a frame size that's quite small in comparison to 35 millimeter still film, because still film, you run it sideways. You know, for example, in this Hasselblad camera, you know, the film is going to run, the film's going to run like this. Oh, that's going to run up and down, isn't it? Oh, never mind. I'm not going to use that example. I take that back. But anyways, in still cameras and DSLR cameras, or not DSLR, SLR cameras, or any 35 millimeter film format, you ran the film sideways, right? So that's why you have that 35 millimeter film format. And that is what we call full frame right now. So it's not VistaVision. Full frame is 24 by 36. That's the format. And that's what we use for a lot of these sensors. When we say full frame coverage, we mean generally like, you know, the Canon 5D or Sony Venice camera, or a camera like that, or A7, Sony A7 camera. They all have full frame sensors. Now, Alexa LF and LF Mini and OpenGate have a little bit bigger than full frame, and they're closer to what was traditionally known as VistaVision, which was about 3% larger than full frame format. And then in motion picture film, you know, we sometimes call that APS-C, or we call it Super 35 like, but you know, the closest that we get to Super 35 film is honestly APS-C or something close to that. That really is about the full format size that you can see, and you can see that from that picture that we have on the bottom right, where that kind of nomenclature came from. And the reason that you have APS-C sensors for photo cameras is because in photography, you know, the sensor got incrementally larger over time. Like when digital sensors first came out, it really threw photographers for a loop, because they were used to using a 24 by 36 frame and using glass that worked with that. And all of a sudden, you know, they're using a very small sensor size inside the digital cameras when they first were introduced. And so lensing really became confusing. And APS-C came out of that as being a very acceptable size with a magnification you can quickly understand in your head, a 1.6 difference between, you know, a full frame 24 by 36 and APS-C. So that's why it became such a popular format. But let's talk about lens coverage when lenses are designed differently. So here we have 2 examples of 2 different lenses. On the left side, we see a lens that was designed for full frame cinema, full frame photography. And on the right, we see a lens that was designed for a crop sensor. Now, these are very extreme examples because we've literally portholed the camera or the lens camera combo and showed you the effect here. You know, in generally, it's going to be more of a gradient at the edges. It's not going to be just a stark black. But it's a good reminder of what we're talking about here. On the right side, let's say that's like an ultra prime or a master prime line of lenses. It was meant to be qualified to illuminate that type of circle. Yes, it might illuminate more because, you know, just when you design different focal lengths or you're trying to match, some focal lengths will give you better coverage than others will. But it was meant to do that. And then on the left, you have a lens system like Supreme Prime Radiance, CZ2s, which were meant to be designed to be used on a larger sensor. So the lens that was designed to be used on a larger sensor on the left can be used on a smaller sensor quite easily. In fact, in a smaller sensor, the image will be cleaner in the middle. Whereas a lens that was designed to be used for a crop sensor or a smaller sensor cannot easily be used on a full frame sensor or a larger sensor because it was never meant to be. If it happens to cover, that's just, you know, by circumstance and maybe not by design, or, you know, it was necessary for the design for it to be like that. So that's why it's really interesting to understand what lenses were meant to be used with, and try to get that in your head, like, okay, this was meant to be used on Super 35, this was meant to be used on full frame. That's why I'm seeing two different things. Not because, you know, there's something wrong with the lens that's, you know, meant for Super 35, or that there's something lesser about it. It just was meant to do a different type of job than what you're asking it to do. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't experiment. You should try it out. There might be some great focal lengths of super speeds, for example, that you can use on a larger sensor, but then there are going to be others that you can't use at all. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for just a second and open it up for questions. Does anyone have a question right now before I move on? You could type it in the chat. So on the bottom of your screen, you might see a chat button, or if you've gone full screen, hit the more 3 dots and click on the chat, and you can type it over there so that we can see it, and we can answer your questions. And we can let you talk too. You could ask your question live. No? All right. I'm gonna start moving on, but if you do have a question, just please go right ahead. Oh, I guess there's a new message. Are these slides available? Yes, we'll make these available at the end. All right, so moving on. Here we've stacked a few different sensors, and in here, instead of making a black, you know, stark port-holding effect, I've added a little bit of a gradient, so you kind of get the effect. But you understand that when a lens projects a image circle, just to understand an image circle better, it's projecting onto a sensor plane. So this image circle that you see here is a projection, a circular projection that's falling onto the image plane, and the image plane is flat. And so therefore, you can see in what rectangle it's seeing, you know, of the actual projection. So the Super 35 film plane is seeing that projection in the middle. A red helium 8K sensor that's set to full frame mode is seeing, you know, what you see in that rectangle. Full frame camera, like that's actually 24 by 36, like a Sony Venice, is seeing what's inside that you know, bolded rectangle. And outside of it, you see the Red Weapon 8K, which is like the VistaVision, which is the Monstro sensor. And you can see that the image circle is kind of struggling to actually, you know, illuminate the corners. Now, that may mean that the corners are dark, or it just means that you're actually going to have a little bit of black in the corners. And you might have to crop in the sensor to, instead of 8K, maybe 7.5, or 8K, you know, 185 crop, or 16:9 crop, or something like that, where it kind of just makes the frame a little bit smaller to kind of get rid of that crop. So this is an image circle illumination example for CZ2 lenses, for the compact zooms, or what we call the cinema zoom lenses. The 15 to 30 to 20 to 80, 70 to 200 should at least give you about this much illumination, because it will clear full frame and it'll do a good job with that. But anything a little bit wider, it's gonna, you know, not be as good as if you used a prime. Now, if you use a prime lens like the Supreme Prime, a Cp3, or Supreme Prime Radiance, it'll actually have a little bit bigger coverage, even from the widest to the most telephoto. All right. So when I say image projection, you do have to realize that it really is an image projection coming out the back of the lens. So when we talk about a lens projecting, we'll use Supreme Prime right here as an example. What's going on here is light is coming through the front of the lens over here. So it comes in the front, the light comes in the front, goes around inside through the elements, and it comes out and it projects onto a film plane here, just like a projector would project onto a wall. It's just that what the the lens is projecting is a circle. And what you're doing is you're cropping out a part of that circle with a rectangle and pulling it out. So that's exactly what this image is showing you, is that if you have a image projection that's full frame, if you have a full frame lens and that's supposed to cover a larger sensor, it will have that projection no matter what. It's still going to project that bigger black circle. It's just that, are you going to see more or less of that circle because of the kind of sensor that you have? So that's the main thing that you have to realize, is that the projection is not going to change. So people think that focal lengths behave differently on different sensors. They don't. The focal length is going to behave the same. It's still going to do the exact same thing. It's just that your sensor is going to see more or less of this image it's projecting, not the other way around. The lens actually doesn't know what sensor you're using. It has no way of understanding what camera system you're using. Even smart lenses are pushing out information. They're not taking information in. So it doesn't know what you're using. It's just projecting the same image all the time. So here's the difference between a typical, full format APS-C versus full frame. So it's about a 1.6 times difference. So if I put a 16:9 crop on both sensors, you get about the same ratio, just for references. So that's why you say that, your angle of view difference between typical Canon APS-C versus Canon, full frame, like a 5D versus 7D, is approximately 1.6 difference. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. So first, let's talk about what focal lengths do. Well, focal lengths, first of all, are used creatively in filmmaking, right? In reality, they're magnifications. They're like microscopic magnifications. They're meant to bring reality closer to you. That's the general idea of what focal lengths are. It's just that we use them creatively because we can, right? So we manipulate it. Here, we're seeing creative use, 4 different creative uses of a focal length telling 4 different stories. So in all these situations, we kept the size of the talent's head about the same. And she's obviously a teacher in a classroom, but the story changes depending on which focal length and the distance we are from the talent. In the 15mm, really wide aspect ratio, where we're up close, you really get a lot of distortion when you're at that distance from the talent. And also you see a lot at the same time too. So this is a very expensive shot. You're going to have a lot of production design and really fill in the gaps here and light everything and be able to see everything clearly. At the same time, you get the emotional response from the film, from this image, that this woman is like really happy that her devilish kids went home for the day because she's just tired of them, and can't be happier to go home, have some wine and relax, because you're distorting her face, so it makes her seem more stressed out. Then if you double the focal length and you step back a little bit, right away you see that you've changed, by going to 35mm, you've changed the look completely, and you've made her more relaxed and more in charge, and she's just so sad that her angels had to go home for the day because she was having so much fun. And then on the third image, the 85mm, now you're really adoring this teacher because you're in class and she really speaks to you. You can tell that she's in a classroom, but you're not really focused on what's going on around. You're really focused on that, right? And then on the fourth example, you're talking about not really caring at all what the background is. So in the 150mm, you've really compressed everything. You've thrown everything. You're really focused on just the talent itself and saying, okay, this story is about a cold case file, and you really want to interview Janet really badly. So you're going to
Hey,
send somebody
Snehal.
in. Yes.
Quick question from the field: is this is the classroom scene a Super 35 example or a full frame?
They're all full frame. These shots are all full frame.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So again, distressed, in charge, classroom, large and in charge, adoring the teacher. You definitely know it's the classroom. To, it doesn't matter where she is. I don't care where she is and what she's doing. We really need to talk to her. So you have 4 different emotional responses you can get out of just positioning the lens and camera, a certain distance away and using different focal lengths. So these are all full frame examples, but you can just literally crop in to see what the Super 35 shot would be, using the exact same focal length. But the idea here is more to tell you what emotional response you're getting out of each lens and why that comes into play. Well, because now you can manipulate that more. There we go. When you have full frame cameras, because with a full frame camera, you can see differently. There's no way possible physically for a full frame sensor and a Super 35 sensor to give you the exact same image. It's not possible because of the way combination, if you're trying to get the same angle of view, for example, the same objects in your frame, you would have to change focal lengths or distance from your subject. Therefore, the physics of the world of what you're capturing would change. So no matter what, you just can't see it. So what full frame does is it opens up a new world for cinematographers and cinematography because it gives you a bigger, wider aspect. So cameras that are shooting full frame even back in the day on film, they were called VistaVision cameras. Paramount came out with these camera systems. They now live, a lot of them, at Panavision. But these are film cameras where the film ran sideways. It's still the 35 millimeter film. It's just that it's run sideways instead of straight up and down. So your frame is different, not the material that you're using. So they were able to save money by, instead of going to 65 millimeter film and spending way more money, exponentially more for processing and, doing any work on it in post-production. Instead, they were able to use the same 35 millimeter film strip, but have a different type of frame that ran sideways. And that was called VistaVision. So that opened up a whole new world for cinematography because it really is closer to human vision than Super 35, which seems to be more of like a mask, like, blinders on a horse, where VistaVision opens it up. And we see that here in this example, where we're using, a focal length. I believe this is a 25 millimeter focal length. And I'm sorry, the text is not showing up. But this is a 25 millimeter. And by the way, these photographs are all by Richard Sluning, who's joined us. He's the senior sales director for North and South America for Photo and Cine. A lot of people know Richard. Maybe he can say hi. So Stephen, we can activate him for a second. But these are his photographs. He's texting. Hi to everybody. So in this case, with the 25 millimeter, the bot is 25. There we go. Great. So with the 25 millimeter, when you had the crop sensor, the APS-C size sensor, or in this case, let's say like a Super 35 camera, Alexa Mini, Alexa, the classic, F55 from Sony, a red helium cropped down a little bit. These kinds of camera systems, or Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro, for example, when you had that crop sensor, that's what the 25 looked like. That's what you were seeing. But there was more to the image that you could see in a full frame camera lens combo that now you can get out of it. So you can be the same distance. You can get the same type of characteristics in terms of the bending of the frame, the distortion, the kind of separation between the foreground and background at that f-stop or that t-stop. All those characteristics are still exactly the same and preserved. The look of everything's the same. You just see more. So I can be closer and get a lot more out of this frame. I can see, with full frame, I can see the guitar, the hands, the playing, more of the New York background, and really more of the production design, because it's there. It's just that, you can see more of it. Or you can do something else. You can use a longer focal length lens to go even tighter onto this character and have more of a separation of the background. You can be more creative and do more things because you have more choices when you have more real estate to play with. Here's another example of maybe you're in a tight space and there's a wall behind you and you can't back up. So and this is a 21 millimeter lens. And in this case, with the 21 millimeter, you're forced to, in the crop sensor, make a couple of choices. You can say, well, if I use this 21 millimeter, yes, my escalator looks nice and straight. I love the lines. I love the placement of where the actors are going to come in. But I don't like the fact that I can't see everything and I can't see food court without doing a pan. And I really don't want to do a pan here. It's not the creative idea I have. Well, you can't move back. So the only other choice would have been, instead of the 21 millimeter, is to try an 18 millimeter or a 15 millimeter. But then what's going to happen when you use an 18 millimeter and 15 millimeter? You're going to have more distortion, right? You're going to have stretching lines. You're going to have actors' faces that get bigger. So you're going to have a lot of detriment that maybe you don't want. It's not right for the story you're telling. you're trying to tell a story of these like slick people that are pulling off a heist, and it's not going to look good if they're all distorted in this particular shot. So with the full frame camera, without having to move back, you now have more real estate to deal with. And you can use the same focal length lens, you can have the exact same distortion, the same look and everything, but you can now see it in full frame. Now people ask me like, oh, is this really the case? Like if I took a 21mm ultra prime on an Alexa versus a 21mm Supreme Prime on an Alexa LF, is it really the same image? Yes, it's exactly the same, because the 21mm is just a magnification. It's going to render the same image. If it was full frame, it would render this larger image. And if the lens was not meant for full frame, maybe it will vignette quite a bit as it get to the edge of, outside the corners of what you see in the crop sensor area. That's just exactly what's going to do. But if you put the Supreme Prime on both the Alexa LF and the Alexa Mini, you're going to get this exact rendering, and you could use the same lens for both, right? It's just that in the Alexa Mini, you're going to be looking through a cleaner, more perfect part of the lens. So actually your image will be quite clean. And maybe that's not what you're looking for, but I just, as an example, yes, you can do that. You can take the exact same 21mm lens and you can put it on both camera systems, and you'll notice that it's literally just a crop. That's all that Alexa Mini is seeing, is a crop of what the Alexa LF is seeing. It has the same pixel pitch, the same pixel dimensions, the same sensor technology. So it really does see the same image. It's just that you're seeing more or less of it. And that's really the trick behind understanding full frame versus Super 35. Let's give another wide angle example. This is a 15mm lens. I believe this is the ZE lens, and Rich can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the crop sensor, you really did have a really interesting image. You had Popeye arm throwing a ball, and it looks like it's going to hit that poor guy in the head before it hits the target. It's quite distorted. The fence looks like it's really long, going to the targets. All that is there, but with the full frame, without moving, you can see so much more of the story. You can see the girls taunting the guy, because they won prizes and he didn't. You can see his girlfriend about to walk off and just leave Popeye arm behind. And you can see the motivation of where the lighting is coming from and the name of the game and everything else. So it just gives you more to work with. And again, you can choose not to, because on a lot of camera systems, especially if using a Sony Venice or a Red camera system, and even Alexa to LF to some degree, you can crop in. So if you decide you want to crop and still have high resolution, you can still do that and still get at least 4K and crop in, but you can't crop out, right? You can't take a sensor and add more. So the nice thing about another nice thing about full frame is that you have more creative choices. So this is one good example. And it works in the other way too, in the close-up. This is an 85mm lens. And traditionally, when the cropped area at this distance from the talent, this is what you would see. And now with the full frame sensor, you can see so much more. You can still see the bokeh and the fall off, and you can see actually a bigger gradation of in focus to out of focus hairs. And you can see more of the background. Really, it just looks like you have so much more production design to work with and more real estate to work with, even on the long side, on the 85mm. And what's really interesting is that if you want to now, because you're getting a larger frame, you can now go even more telephoto. So you can start to use more telephoto focal lengths instead of wider focal lengths to do what you used to do, wide. So before, if I used to use it like a 25mm to set a shot in a living room, now I can use a 35mm and my lines will be even straighter, because we always worry about distortion on the wide angle lenses. Now we could use a slightly longer focal length of lens, and now my curtain rods and my bookshelves and everything will be much straighter looking and more correct. So if my shot called for that, if it called for the perfect looking living room, why not use a longer focal length lens and use a larger sensor so that you can still get that wide effect, but it's cleaner lines. So you have a lot of different choices that way. Because again, just to remind you, focal lengths are magnification. So if I want to make a James Bond movie, and I always bring this example up, if I'm making a James Bond film and, you know, my actress has to look absolutely perfect and can't look distorted at all, then I'm going to stay the exact same distance away from her all the time and just use longer focal lengths to go in closer for the tighter shots, because that will give me a completely undistorted look. My widest shot will look exactly like my most telephoto, because in my widest shot, if I'm that distance from the talent, I should just maintain it from the widest angle and create a semicircle track around her. And then when someone comes in to have a conversation with her, I'm the same distance away on the semicircle track, not breaking the 180-degree rule, but I'm able to move in closer with different focal lengths and keep the distortion out of it. So that's the way to do it, by not moving in closer. And that's why I keep reminding people that focal lengths equal magnification. It means bringing the world closer to you. That's what focal lengths are. Cool. I'm going to pause here for just a second before I go into lenses from Zeiss that cover full frame and answer any questions. Are there any questions? Michael, can we activate Michael Kerner? Stephen? Hi, Michael. You're on.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I just want to say thanks for showing up to the first Pacific Northwest Virtual Lens Summit. This is the first edition. Hopefully we're going to be doing this every Friday at 10 with all the other different manufacturers that were unable to make the Lens Summit because of the virus being canceled and everything. So anyway, welcome. And I think that's about it.
Cool. Good so far on the presentation. Are there any
questions? No, it's
you
great.
Have? All right, cool. I'm going to move on to Zeiss lenses that cover full frame so that you have a good rundown. So if you still have CP2s around, they will cover full frame. And the only one that you're going to maybe have a problem with is the 18 millimeter, because that covered APS-H, which was a format that was in width and dimensions between APS-C and full frame. There was an APS-H. It covered that, and that really had to do with the lens barrel design, the optical, not the optical design, but the barrel design itself. Aside from that, all the other CP2s did cover full frame, including the CP2 super speeds. So if you have this in your rental house, or if you have these lenses, try them out on the new cameras. You'll be very, very pleasantly surprised at how nice they look. They're beautiful lenses, especially with the super speeds. They really have an interesting look when you open them up at T1.5. I always say they start to fall apart in terms of their optical precision, but at the same time, they create really cool effects because of these aberrations, more ghosting, more of the light bouncing around inside the lens, more of these, softer chromatic aberrations. They have a really nice look. So take a look at them, try them out. You'll be very surprised. I mean, it's a modern lens that handles a motor, well, and you can play with it. There's 3 focal lengths, of course, 35, 50, 85, that had this treatment where they open up the iris to T1.5. But they're really nice, unique lenses, and you can do a nice shoot with them. So check them out. They have, of course, interchangeable mount system, which we find on a lot of our modern cinema lenses, like the CP3s, like the lightweight zoom, compact zooms, and Supreme Primes and Supreme Prime Radiance. They all have some kind of interchangeability. The CP2s and CP3s, you can have 5 different mounts that you can trade in and out, like in a rental house environment. So you have your PL mount, EF for Canon, F mount for Nikon, Micro Four Thirds, and E mount for Sony. So there's a lot of choices. And these 5 same choices are available for CP2, CP3, for the Cinema Zoom, CZ2s, for the Lightweight Zoom 3 as well. So all of these lines of lenses have the ability to change all 5 mounts. Now the Supreme Prime Radiance, you can choose between PL and LPL. So if you want to go native on your Alexa LF or LF Mini, you can go and swap out with an LF mount, or LPL mount, sorry. This is something you can do yourself. There's videos online and there's instructions, and it's really not difficult to do. You can learn how to change them out. You can learn how to shim the lens. We have experts online today, right now. Oh, did I freeze? Am I frozen, or is it just me?
You're frozen, but it'll come back.
It'll come back. All right, cool.
We can hear you just fine.
Great. Yeah, we have experts here that have been doing this for years, you know, in the rental house environment of swapping this stuff out. So real easy to do. It allows you to move the same lens system between different camera systems, and it keeps you relevant. And that was the beauty of, you know, having the CP2s with interchangeable mount system, was that you can keep changing camera systems. You know, if you purchase the lenses, you could move every time you move to camera system, you could still use it with that camera system. And if you had them in a rental house, then you could be relevant all the time. So it was a really great way to have versatility. Now, of course, now we've come out with the CP3 lenses. So the CP3 lenses are 10 full frame lenses with an improved cinematic look. And I'm actually going to share with you a difference, because people ask me all the time, hey, what's the difference between the CP2 and CP3? Well, I'm actually going to show you so that you can see for yourself. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share something else. So we have this from our upcoming vlog. So pay, you know, look out for the vlog, but just to, oops. There we go. So here you see a CP2 and CP3, and it's all about coatings and matte black finish in the inside that cut the stray light and the ghosting and give you more accurate image with higher contrast ratios and better image quality. And that's the difference between the CP2 and CP3. You can see it quite clearly here, how it controls the flare and ghosting characteristics versus the CP2 at the exact same settings. So this is a very interesting way to see right away, quickly, how these two are different. Now, this is going to be part of a vlog that we're going to be posting, so stay tuned for that. And that's a deep dive into Radiance lenses and how they work. All right, cool. So the other nice thing about the CP3 lenses is that you do have the choice. And by the way, again, they're lightweight. They're about a third lighter, so they're 2/3 the weight of a typical CP2 lens. The front diameters are around 95 instead of 114. They're quite compact, really improved characteristics in terms of better focus and iris rings. And then if you want to, you can get a version of it that has metadata. So wait, am I sharing? Sorry. Apologies. There we go. So there's a version you can get with or without metadata. And then with the metadata is the XD version. And the XD version allows you to record information either in camera or separately with the box, information about the lens characteristics. So not just the focus and iris position and the normal information you would get with the lens, but also shading and distortion characteristics for visual effects. So there's 10 focal lengths in the family from 15 to 135. They're color matched. They really give you a nice Zeiss look. They're cleaner and a little bit improved in terms of the optical performance over the CP2, as you saw from that example. And you could see, you know, yourself by doing a test. And they're quite affordable, and they are a great price point for what you get. And they really give you a variety of different focal lengths. And we saw from early in the presentation why having a variety of focal lengths would be important. And having a 10 lens set is key if you really want to make a great picture. The more focal length choices you have, the happier the cinematographer is going to be, for sure. So on the XD version of the lens, you have different options here for lens communication. So you have pins in the back that communicate directly into the camera, or you have a connector on the side that you know, you can connect to an external device, right? So you have two choices in terms of how you're going to communicate the XD technology. And this XD technology can be used for, you know, lens systems like Preston. You can plug into the external connector and it can read the lens and it can read the focus and iris position automatically, for example, or in the UMC4A from ARRI, that can also read it as well. Or if you had a camera system, like any camera system that can read Cook/I technology can read this lens. So it can be any Arri camera, Sony camera, Red camera, Blackmagic, Canon with smart mount, you know, all kinds, Panasonic cameras. All these camera systems can read Cook/I. It's an open source type of, well, it's not exactly open source, but it's a very low pay-to-play type of system. I mean, manufacturers are paying a €1 a year licensing fee to be able to integrate this technology. So it's a great open way for people to communicate and use this protocol. And we've used this, whoops, there we go. So like I mentioned, different camera systems can use it. And you can use capture, shading, and distortion characteristics in real time for visual effects. Now, traditionally, visual effects had to use like lens grids and charts to try to figure out what kind of bend you're getting in your distortion, the mapping, or what kind of fall off of exposure you're having from center to edge. Because you have to realize that if you have a lens that's at a T4, you're going to have very little difference in exposure from the very center of the frame to the edge of the frame. It's really going to be quite consistent. But as soon as you start opening it up and open up the iris, that changes drastically. So at a lens at a T1.4 or 1.5 or T1.3, like on a master prime, the illumination at the center and at the edge is going to be different. And it's going to be a difference you can actually measure quite easily. But as soon as you close down the lens, T4, T5, 6, all of a sudden it evens out. You have to know what that difference is in visual effects. Otherwise, if you add a layer in the front or in the back, and if it also doesn't have those same characteristics as it moves to the edge of the frame, it's not going to look realistic. So what visual effects artists do, and I'm actually going to show you an example right now so you can actually see what they do in Nuke, for example. There we go. I'm just going to let this play so that you can see it. And please warn me if it's not working. But essentially, you can see here that in Nuke, you can actually take this data, and the way that we've passed this information on, either you can create a sidecar file or inject this data directly into the image sequence you give visual effects. So if the OpenEXR sequence itself, you can inject, and it will actually have, you know, these characteristics of what the shading and distortion characteristics are already built into the system. And it's a great way to pass on the information. And right now we're activating a checkerboard pattern just so you can kind of see the distortion and shading characteristics. You can see the illumination and how it's a little bit different at the edge. And he's putting the illumination back in and then undistorting it. So what the process is for visual effects is they're going to undistort the image and unshade the image, put your layer on top of it, and then reapply the shading and distortion characteristics at the end. And this is from Jay-Z's project at the HPA conference. This is Lost Lederhosen is the name of the short film. He got the idea from Stucco, the short film that we produced that's on Alter, the YouTube channel right now that has a lot of views. But we had visual effects like this. And the nice thing is that there's two camera systems that record these characteristics directly that you can pass on later on for visual effects. And that is the Red DSMC2 camera systems. That includes the Monstro sensor, the Helium, the Gemini, also in the Ranger format, and as well as the Sony Venice camera. So in the Red camera, if you record in the DSMC2 body in R3D, or if you use a Sony Venice camera in the RAW format, you will get these characteristics and be able to use them, and then later on use them in visual effects as well, without having to shoot charts and without having any kind of issues trying to generate exactly what those characteristics look like. Because the problem is right now with the charts and stuff that you shoot, you're really, you know, not getting the best information. You're just getting information that could work for you, you know, only for that sensor system and only for the circumstances you shoot under. Whereas having these distortion shading characteristics that map actually what the lens is doing at all times, and not just, you know, when you shoot lens charts, you shoot maybe 4 focal distances or 5 focal distances on a chart, and then you're interpolating the middle part, you know, as you move the focus barrel. You know, the software is going to interpolate what actually the distortion, how it's changing, and make a best guess. But we're actually giving the real data of the exact shading distortion characteristics. So it's quite advanced. It's in the CP3 XTs, it's in the Supreme Primes, and in the Radiance. The other full frame capable lens system that we have is the compact zooms, or what we like to call the cinema zooms. They again have the same 5 mounts: PL, EF, EF, and micro four thirds. They're quite robust. You see them in a lot of rental houses. They're quite popular. They're great image quality. They match well with Master Primes, Ultra Primes, with Supreme Primes, and Radiance because of the kind of look that they get. It's very Zeiss-like. It's a very nice look. And you saw a lot of use of these great lenses, these zooms, on really high budget productions over the last few years, because they were used on the 2 most expensive rental packages in LA for a while. So the Alexa 65, when it came out, before the Alexa LF or LF Mini came out, if you had a Netflix production and you insisted on using Alexa technology, that cinematographer only had one choice, which was to use the Alexa 65, but maybe crop down the sensor to like 5K or 4.5K and use a lens that's full frame capable, instead of having to use only lenses that are 65 millimeter capable and having to use 65 millimeter recording size, because a 65 millimeter recording size meant a lot more data, exponentially more data, more hard drive space, lenses that, were quickly being developed but not readily available, lots of drawbacks. But if you shrank that sensor size down and record it smaller, you can record in a pretty decent amount of data, use full frame lenses. So this lens system by Area Rental, they converted a lot of CZ2s to XPL mount and used them on the Alexa 65. And this was before the LF was introduced. So they were quite popular. Now they've converted them to LPL mount and use them interchangeably on a lot of different camera systems. And then on the other end of it, with Panavision, because the Monstro was a good pairing for the CZ2s, and you saw a lot of people using the CZ2s for the Monstro system, you also saw in the DXL and the DXL2, because the DXL2 is essentially the Monstro sensor in a different skin. And for that, Panavision wanted to have a set of lenses that, or a set of zooms that worked with their Primo 70 series of lenses. So they adopted the 15 to 30 and the 28 to 80 to be Panavized. And if you get these lenses, if you rent it, the 15 to 30 is rated as a T2.9 and the 28 to 80 a T3, you're essentially using the same glass. It's just rehoused, which is great, which means that even Panavision liked it too. So again, DXL2 and DXL and Alexa 65, which were arguably some of the most expensive camera packages to rent in LA at the time, were using CZ2 lenses. They have a really great reputation. We introduced the Supreme Prime lenses recently. A lot of you have had a chance to use them. They're great full frame coverage lens. There's a huge series coming out. There's still 4 more focal lengths coming out. So we're gonna have 14 lenses between 15 and 200 millimeter. So 15, 18, 21, 25, 29, 35, 50, 65, 85, 100, 135, 150, and 200. That's a lot of focal lengths. It's a lot of choices for the cinematographer. They provide really nice coverage. It's full frame plus, so you will easily be able to handle Alexa LF, LF Mini, Sony Venice, Canon C700, and even up to the Red Monstro size sensor, DXL2 size sensor. So you can use it on all these different manufacturers' cameras. You can get LPL mount natively on the lens if you want to put on the Alexa LF, or you can just use an adapter that comes with the camera system. Either way works. They're lightweight, well built, and they feature the XT technology that we went over. They're great in the field. We're getting awesome feedback. There's a lot of shows that you can watch right now that use the Supreme Primes. One of note right now, John Joffin's show that he worked on with other cinematographers, that's called Fort Salem, which is a freeform show that you can watch on Hulu. It's being heavily promoted. That's all Supreme Primes. There's a new show coming out from HBO called Lovecraft Country that Robert McLaughlin, who's a very well-noted cinematographer, shot along with others, and they chose Supreme Primes as well. And there's a whole playlist you can go to on Zeiss Cinematography or Zeiss Lenses Americas. That is the Supreme Prime playlist. And you can actually see all the different projects, a lot of different, trailers for movies and like Downton Abbey, for example, and commercials that you can see that were used, the Supreme Primes were used for. So they have a really nice consistent T-stops too. So out of all the focal lengths that I mentioned, out of all 14, 11 of them are T15. And then you have the 15 and the 150, which are going to be T18. The 200 will be a T22, I believe. And so, you have a lot of consistency, being able to go wide open if you want to. You can close down, of course, to get more depth of field, but really, like, you have the choice to use this high quality glass at a very low T-stop. And they have a very versatile look. So they're clean and neutral. And in terms of the balance of the colors, they're using the most forward-thinking anti-reflective coatings. So they're the best that we have so far, available at Zeiss. And therefore, they're going to have the most neutral color balance in terms of reflections and reflectivity. So therefore, in terms of warm, cool, they're going to be right there, right in the middle. But that means that since they're clean and neutral, you can make them look like whatever you want. With the combination of filtration, LUTs, and these lenses, you can really create any kind of look that you want. And you're seeing cinematographers really pushing the envelope and creating all kinds of different looks with it, however they want. This is a tool that really has a lot of versatility. It has a nice gentle sharpness. It has a nice roll off from in focus to out of focus. There's a really long gradient. Part of that reason is because we didn't opt to go with a cam driven system that has multiple floating elements like you do in the Master Prime. That does eliminate focus breathing when you do that, but you also get a sharper focus curve that peaks in and peaks out of focus, whereas a system like this allows you, which is a helicoil system, allows you to pop into and pop out of focus with a lot softer curve. So when you are focusing, moving in and out of focus, manipulating it for the story, you'll see a nice gentle sharpness following the action, and it's quite pretty. And it has a very elegant bokeh. You have either 16 or 18 blade iris, depending on the focal length. If the focal length has a larger diameter, a 114 diameter, it's a bigger lens, it's going to have more iris blades, and at 18. And if you are at 95 diameter, I'll have 16 iris blades. So the bokeh is quite round. The out of focus is quite pleasant. And of course, you have the precision and the ergonomics of a modern lens. I mean, this is a lens that can handle lens motors. You're not going to have a problem with it. It's not going to fall short for you. It's easily serviceable. There's service training available. You can remove the front and rear elements and get to work on it fairly easily. You can swap the lens from metric to imperial inches very, very quickly. And there's instructions on how to do that on the website. Compact design, lightweight, and very consistent look between all of the focal lengths. And of course, the focus and iris position are always the same as with any of our cinema glass. And of course, it's developed in Germany and with the best technology. And we're using the same production lines that we were using for all of our high-end cinema lenses. And the lenses have been tested, they've been put in freezers and they've been dropped and they've been put in ovens and all that stuff. So we have a nice range of operation from 0 to 100 degrees that allows the lens to perform the same no matter if it's cold or warm. And that's really important to make sure that the focus and iris rings are always performing as expected. The only thing that you got to watch out for in these conditions when I'm talking about cold or hot is that do keep in mind there is some expansion and contraction of metal, so there will be a change in back focus, okay? And that happens on all lenses, and that's not something you can avoid very easily, so just be cognizant of that, especially in the rental environment. And then, of course, it integrates the extended data technology, which we went over. Aside from these focal lengths that we have listed here, we are going to be introducing a 40 millimeter lens as per demand. So there'll be 14 and not 13 focal lengths. And the other misinformation on this particular chart is the 200 millimeter is actually going to be T22, not T21. So that's the only difference. These are the 6 focal lengths that were introduced initially. A lot of people see these 6 focal lengths in the rental environment because it was the initial 6 lens set. But I encourage you to look right now because we already introduced the 21 the 65, the 135, and the 150. So now you have 21 to 150, a lot of focal lengths available, and we have some in stock when work comes back and people are looking at Supreme Prime lenses. And if you're missing the wider or the more telephoto, do keep in mind we do keep them around, so we do have them if you need them. And now let's talk about the Radiance lenses, because the Radiance lenses are a modification of the Supreme Prime lenses, and we've messed with the coatings to give you a different type of look. And what we're trying to do here is fulfill demand, because cinematographers want choices. They don't always want a clean look. A lot of times they want to muddy up the lens somehow or create artifacts, ghosting, flare characteristics to help tell the story. So this is a lens design that was meant to do that. Again, it's still full frame. It's still giving you the Supreme Prime coverage and look, feel, built the same way, because they look the same, except for the fact that they have gold rings in the back instead of black, and they say Radiant, they're stamped with the Radiance logo on them. Aside from that, they are Supreme Prime. So you have 7 focal lengths from 21 to 100, 21, 25, 29, 35, 50, 85, and 100. And they're quite consistent in terms of the flare characteristics between them, because they're designed to be that way. And they're full frame, and they have a really great look. So here's a shot from a film by Tobias Schleichler. He liked them particularly because they reflect back a little bit of blue, and that blue reflects inside and causes the flaring and ghosting. It transmits all the other light level the same. It's just that it's minus blue a little bit, a tiny spectrum of blue. That's because that results in the image looking a little bit warmer and skin tones looking a little bit warmer. So if you get a chance to watch this film, it's called Refugee, and it's by Tobias Schleichler, was the cinematographer, shot on the Sony Venice, through Keslow camera. You can take a look at what he means, because the skin tones really pop and they are quite warm. And then he uses the flare characteristics very creatively in just some of the scenes, but the rest of the movie, he doesn't concentrate on throwing light into it, because it wouldn't look realistic for him. So it's a really great example. But the other example, of course, that you can watch right now is Rodrigo Prieto's example. And he creatively uses an R&R, a short piece about Rust. It's called, what's it called again? Something in Release. I forgot what R&R stands for, but basically, this is in the prison system, a story about a man that's about to get released at the same time another young man is coming in, and he's telling the story of both concurrently, and he's using the flares creatively. So you can watch this piece as well, again, on YouTube, on our channel, on our website, zeiss.com/cine. You can go to the Radiance page, and these videos are all there, including an interview with Rodrigo Prieto on what he felt the lens characteristics of flares gave him. Eric Dumont has done a short film as well, which you can watch, called All Blood Runs Red, and it's quite popular, and it's been making some splashes on film festivals and online, and you could take a look at that as well. And that's another creative way to use in a dramatic picture flare characteristics, and it's about a boxer that went on to become a fighter pilot. You really have to watch it. It's fantastic. And that's shot on the Red Ranger. So we have a variety of different pieces with great cinematography that you can watch to see what I'm talking about when I say these flare characteristics. And at the same time, you can see what the skin tones and how they come out in comparison to normal Supreme Primes. Now, both have their uses. The great thing is they both match really well with one another, so you can mix and match focal lengths of Supreme Primes with Radiance. And if you don't push a light source directly into it, you're not going to get these flare characteristics. So as long as you flag it off, it's really going to look like a Supreme Prime, just slightly warmer. And this is the reflection that you see when you look at the lens. When you put a light source, you see this faint blue, and that is the coating reflecting back at you, creating these flare characteristics. It's a very interesting look. Same versatility as Supreme Prime, same durability mechanics, just slightly warmer tone, and the possibility to control flares by controlling light sources that go directly into it. And so there's 7 focal lengths: 21, 25, 29, 35, 50, 85, and 100. The other lenses that you can use for full frame are, the still lenses that are meant for a full frame camera size. So we have a whole a few line of lenses actually that you can use that were meant for full frame photography that can be used for full frame cinema as well, albeit with the EF mount or Nikon mount, but or E mount for Sony. But you can still use them, and people do all the time. So the Otis lenses are a great example. They're f1.4. There's 4 of them now in the focal length range: 28, 55, 85, and 100. And here's a 28, 55, and 85, but there's also a 100 now as well. But these are great because they're virtually distortion-free, aptochromat, meaning that the chromatic aberration is kind of hidden in the soft out of focus edges and you can't really see it. They have a very advanced design and a really robust poppy look, and people really turn to them. So take a look at the Otis when you get a chance too, because that's a cool lens to experiment with. And again, there's 4 focal lengths: 28, 55, 85, and 100. And aside from that, we have a few other lens types that you can use. You can use the Milvis lenses; those are also full frame. You can use Bodice lenses, that's auto focus but full frame for E mount, and Loxia. Loxia is really interesting because they were used in Top Gun Maverick. Inside the cockpit, there were Voigtlander and Zeiss Loxia lenses used directly on the E mount of the Sony Venice sensor. And the Sony Venices were set up using the Rialto system, where the sensor head was separated from the body. And they were able to put like 2 or 3 or 4 of these cameras into the cockpit and shoot reaction shots and a wider and more telephoto all at the same time, and use mechanically focusable what's it called, manual focus iris and manual focus and iris lenses, Voigtlander and Loxia, because they were directly E mount, saved a lot of space. You could take the PL mount adapter off completely and go very tiny package. So there's a lot of creative ways you can use still lenses that are meant for full frame with these new camera systems as well. Cool. So that brings me to the end of our presentation. Here you can see where we have service available for cinema lenses. If you want qualified factory level service, you can get it at Able Burbank and Able New York in Brooklyn, and of course in Germany. And then we have a service center in Japan for factory level. Aside from that, there's a lot of training that goes into, and we do training with the Pacific Northwest Lens Summit as well. Last year we did a teardown of a Supreme Prime, and we're thinking about bringing that kind of training to this online space as well. So please stay tuned for that to get some, at least learn how to change the scales on the lenses, the Supreme Primes, the Radiance, CP3s, learn how to take off the front and rear elements, and just understand how the system works. At least that much we can do training online, and so we're going to try to do that in the near future. Cool. So I'm going to stop talking now, and Stephen, why don't we go ahead and Tony take some questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
So Tony's offline, but we can unmute Matthew Clark. He had a question earlier about CP3 lenses.
Cool. Matthew Clark.
Hey, Snehal, I was just kind of curious about if you were to compare, I know it's sort of anecdotal, but the CP3s to ultra primes.
Well, I think that the big difference would be, of course, the coverage. Aside from that, it's all up to taste, really, because it's up to you to figure out like what kind of look that you want, because look is going to be a little bit different. Now, of course, they're both Zeiss lenses, right? So they're going to have a similar type of look, but you are going to get different contrast levels, different look in the bokeh, different iris shapes, and things like that. So it's really about taste more than anything else. Sorry, I think you're muted, Matthew. Go ahead, say that again.
I was just curious if you could speak to the resolution side of things with the 2 lenses.
It depends on what sensor size you're using. Right. So if you're using Super 35, they're both going to have similar type of resolving power. But with a full frame, of course, then the CP3s would shine there because they're meant for that kind of sensor size.
Got it.
Right. But aside from that, again, it's about the look and then coatings. Now, the coatings on CP3, believe it or not, are going to be newer than what you found on an older cinema lens, because what we do with the a lens like ultra prime is from the first year that it was made, we don't change the coatings at all. So the formulation of that coating that's put on an ultra prime that's manufactured today is actually the same as the formulations before. So if there's been any improvements or changes in coatings, it's not going to be in an older line of lenses. It's going to be the newer line of lenses. So if you're looking for the best optical performance in terms of the best reflectivity, the least bit of ghosting, the most accurate color response, you're going to get it from the Supreme Primes and the Supreme Prime Radiance. That's just how it is.
Hey, Snehal, could you talk about the limited run on the Radiance Primes, and also are there going to be any additional focal lengths?
So first, the question is the limited run of the lenses. Yes, the Radiance lenses are meant to be available for a shorter period of time. So they're going to be for sale. The original date was supposed to be at the end of April. Now we might see an extension, we might not, I'm not sure. But right now we have about 40 sets that are slated for the Americas. And that includes Canada, Latin America, Mexico, and then United States. So, we're encouraging people to at least indicate to us that they're interested, if nothing else. And then we're taking deposits because we're trying to make sure that whoever needs them gets them. There's a cool things about this though. First of all, it is a nice robust set, 21 through 100. So it is a nice set of focal lengths that you can really use, and it's a good variety. At the same time, everyone's going to have that exact same set. You cannot order 4 lenses out of the set or 3 lenses. In a rental house environment, it's the best case scenario. If you invest in this set of lenses, you will be able to sub-rent them. You're not going to have the problem where someone calls you and say, hey, do you have a 7-lens set? And you say, well, I got 4 lenses, and they call somebody else. They are going to want the lenses from you. So it's a great way to protect the investment of the people that want to take, be forward thinking and want to get into the Radiance lenses. It's a way for them to keep making money from them and have a robust set of lenses that have good value and that will continue to have value for a long period of time. They're going to be rare. They're going to be in demand. Every time we show Radiance lenses to cinematographers, it really blows their mind, the capabilities of it. If you watch these short films that I mentioned, Refugee and R&R and All Blood Runs Red, for example, they're really great examples of what you can do with the technology. And if you watch the TV show Fargo season 4, Dana Gonzalez chose to use the Radiance for the whole season. So you can see that as well. And in terms of more focal lengths being available, it depends on if we meet our numbers. Like if the Radiance lenses take off and there's a demand for other focal lengths, yes, there is a way to do the same type of treatment to other focal lengths of Supreme Primes. It is possible.
So all the rental houses need to get together and not break up the set.
Yeah, you won't be able
to get them as a set. You don't take
get them as a set. You can't take 2. Well, you can't order. We're only selling them as a 7-lens set.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying the rental houses should say it's a set.
Yes. Oh, that'd be great.
So we have another question from Masterbuilt. If you can unmute him, Stephen.
Sure. Hello, Masterbuilt. I don't know if the audio is working or not, but the question is, how much is the set in USD? It's approximately 170,000 USD, and you put a deposit down to get your place in line. And the dealers that you can reach out to are Able, Band Pro, Do Close Lenses, Sammy's DV and Edit, and B&H.
And then a follow-up, how many lenses in the set?
7 lenses. Let me share that slide one more time so you can see it. Sorry. There we go. Let's share this again so everyone can see it. There it is. That's the 7 lenses there, 21, 25, 29, 35, 50, 85, and 100.
So, Snehal, what are the phone folks at Zeiss looking to do in the future after the Radiance primes? Can you discuss that at all?
No. I can't tell you. Cool stuff, really cool. But you know what we try to do is, to be quite honest, Michael, sometimes we make plans, and that, you know, this is about best laid plans. Like when I joined the company in 2015, we really had a nice, robust view of what we wanted to do over like 5-6 years. But it changes. It changes, and the Radiance Lenses is an example of that. There was no initial plan to make a lens set like this. It was because of the demand from cinematographers. We listened to what they said. Zeiss headquarters is open to feedback from the field. All of us around the world that work in cinema, and there's a very small teams around the world that do this, we brought back feedback from the field saying, hey, look, if you're gonna make a lens system for full frame, you have to realize that people used, you know, super speeds and Kawas and, you know, Cook speed Pancros and all that for Super 35, but it's gonna be difficult in full frame because there's not as many choices of lenses that give you interesting looks. And so that's the onus behind the Radiance. And so we actually push back, you know, the development of other stuff to be able to do Radiance. And now, you know, we've also planned what the next thing is too, based on feedback that we're getting of what we should do. So feedback means a lot to us. It's really, we're here to serve the cinematography community. So our jobs are really to, you know, take feedback and create tools that cinematographers can use to make better work. You know, for all kinds of projects. It doesn't matter what your project is, any kind of content you're creating, you have to understand Zeiss has so many different products for so many different levels to help you out. And so we want your feedback, and we want to help you create what you need to create and create the tools that you want. Cool. Any other questions? No, should we open it up to everybody and do a free-for-all and say goodbye? Yeah. So we're going to unmute everybody all at once.
I just want to make a quick announcement that we're going to be doing this on Friday. Next Friday, we're going to be doing a food.
Sorry, you know what? Hold on. We'll mute everyone again and unmute Michael. Steven.
So how many times?
And it's going to be a Fujinon presentation. And then other things we have lined up are probably going to be master built, Tiffin, and then the other lens manufacturers and accessories that go with lenses and cameras.
Thank you so much, Michael, for giving us a forum to be able to speak today. We really appreciate what you've done and to bring the community together. I know times are tough right now, and this is really cool that we get to be able to come together and still interact with one another.
Yeah, super fun.
Yeah. All right, we're going to unmute everybody, and I'm going to say goodbye and get some water. Stop talking. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Snehal. Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.